Welcome to Culture Talk. This is the segment where we talk about culturally relevant topics that you can use to start conversations about your faith. I'm joined today with astrophysicist Jeff Zweerink. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Sandra. Looking forward to our time.
We're talking in this episode about why God would allow earthquakes. And I want to talk with you about that specific topic, why would that happen? So let's first talk about what earthquakes are. Like, what is happening when an earthquake strikes?
So the Earth is built up of kind of a cool structure. There's a core in the center. There's this very large mantle part, and then right at the surface, compared to all of that, there are these very rigid plates, and they're not all connected together. They're butted next to each other, but they're not connected. And so as processes inside the Earth churn up the rock in there, these plates move and they grind along. Sometimes they collide, sometimes they spread apart, sometimes they slip along. And all an earthquake is where those plates are moving next to each other. Energy's stored up, and when they move, that energy is released, you get an earthquake.
You know, you've written on this topic before, and I really love how you explain what it is, like what these plates are doing. You actually also tell a story about growing up in the Midwest, not ever experiencing them, and then you came to California. What was your first earthquake?
Well, it's funny because people in the Midwest tend to be terrified of earthquakes because they never happen in the Midwest. Right. And people out here tend to be terrified of tornadoes and storms. And I grew up with those, and it's like, I love those. But my first earthquake was actually the Hector mine earthquake, which was like a 7.1 magnitude earthquake. We'd moved out here maybe on the order of 3 or 4 months, something like that.
Oh, pretty soon then.
Struck the middle of the night. For whatever reason, both my wife and I woke up just right before it hit. And the only way I can describe it, it's like take your house and put it out on the ocean because the house is just moving up and down. So I got out of bed, walked in, checked on my kids, realized I can't do anything anyway, so went back and got in bed. And it all took about 30, 45 seconds, maybe a minute. And then we went back to sleep.
Yeah, they're pretty scary. I mean, I'm an LA native, so I've had plenty of earthquakes, and you just kind of, I won't get out of bed unless it's over, 6.
Right.
But, they are scary, though, and people do wonder why we would have to endure those. So what are some of the benefits? I mean, we know now how they work, but why would that be something that a good God would put on a planet?
Well, no, that's a great question, and this whole question of why would God allow that? There's just kind of the pastoral of what happens to somebody who deals with an earthquake.
Right.
But then when you look at what does it take to make a planet habitable? Earthquakes plate tectonics, which earthquakes are a consequence of, play an important role in that because these plate tectonics build mountains, they build all of the continental mass you have is because plate tectonics has been happening for billions of years on the Earth. And, so as land is exposed to clouds and storms and all that, it all gets eroded and down into the oceans. If you didn't have plate tectonics, all of the land would disappear and you'd end up covered in this water world. So plate tectonics is a key feature of what makes Earth habitable because part of all of that rock and stuff coming up is that it serves kind of as a global thermostat. It keeps the temperature of the Earth right around the range where liquid water can exist. So despite all the changes that have happened on Earth over the past 4 billion years, its temperature has stayed where liquid water can exist almost that whole time. It's really remarkable what plate tectonics does.
So I love that you're providing kind of this scientific perspective on why plate tectonics would be necessary on a planet that, if we say there's a good God, why would a good God allow that? So you touched briefly on the fact that there's a pastoral component. So let's go there now, because anyone who knows anything about earthquakes can look at everything from Pompeii, where you have this massively destructive earthquake killing people instantly, to Haiti. And hundreds and thousands of people have died even from a single earthquake. So how do you then tackle that question when you say, well, scientifically, this is why we need earthquakes on a planet that's going to host life? Well, how do we address the heart behind that of why would we be okay with a God who allows all of these people to die?
Well, there's no doubt that many people have died as a consequence of volcanoes and earthquakes, which are both related to tectonic activity. We got to be careful, though, that we're putting the quote-unquote blame in the right place. I mean, yes, God created an Earth where there's tectonic activity, but in dealing with people who've dealt with that, there's one, people have just experienced loss. This isn't a time to come in and say, I know your family's died, but earthquakes are really good. So, that's just not the right
Yeah.
time for that. They need comfort, they need service, they need people to take care of them. And so, when you've got tornadoes, when you've got people who've just suffered loss, help them deal with the grief of their loss. But then there is a little bit more of an academic question of why is all this going on and where is really the source of that? And one of the things that I find interesting is that you can look at Vesuvius is a little harder, Pompeii is a little harder to take care of, but let's go look at just earthquakes in the modern era. You've got a relatively small earthquake that hit Haiti that caused, 250,000 people to die. Massive loss there. An earthquake that was anywhere from 100 to 1,000 times larger hit off the coast of Japan, and in the earthquake, virtually nobody died. There were tsunamis that came afterwards, and so, but what's the difference between this relatively small earthquake that kills 250,000 people and a monstrous earthquake that kills hardly anybody? Well, the Japanese know that these earthquakes are going to happen, and they prepare for it. God has put us on this planet, but He's also given us minds and told us to rule over and subdue the planet, which means we have to respond to what the planet is going to do. We have to understand it and use it well. And so I think a lot of what we attribute to, this is God's fault, is really humans mismanaging the creation that God has given us to watch over.
So even like where we decide to live and living in places that are going to put us in danger and having structures that are not sound and won't be able to sustain the effects of an earthquake like that's what you're leading to. Okay.
Well, and most of Earth's history, you talk about earthquakes, where most of the damage is in earthquakes is large structures that fall down. It's been fairly recently that we've started to build large structures. And, we live in California. I get really upset at all the codes because it adds money to any sort of work I want to do on my house. But those codes are there so that when I build the house and an earthquake comes, it stands and the people inside don't get hurt. So I may gripe at losing the money, but I appreciate, hey, this is something important to do because of where I live.
Right. Well, thank you so much for that. There's plenty more to unpack with this topic. If you want to hear more from Jeff, go to reasons.org and search for his blog, Impact Events.